Hey there, greetings everybody. This is Josh Lane with the Eight Shields Institute and welcoming you to the webinar today, Decoding the Secret Language of Nature. And I'm so honored and happy to have you join me here today for this. And really just looking forward to really diving into some bird language skills over this next hour. I'm going to try to keep this presentation to an hour. And just to start off, I'd love to hear in the chat, where are you watching from today? Just put a little hello in there. And I'll send my greetings here from the Hudson River Valley in New York State. And really grateful for the springtime that's kicking into full gear here. Watching broad-winged hawks just return that we have every year on the property here. They journey all the way as far as South America. And just midweek, them returning here and getting to hear their whistles out there and watching the bird language around them has been really a treat. So I'm feeling grateful for the spring today. I see we've got folks Skyping in here from all different places: the Netherlands, Connecticut, California, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Washington, Italy, Cyprus. Wow, super cool. The UK, France. Wow, we've got a great international community tuning in today. Northern Israel, Canada, India, South Spain. Super cool. It's so awesome to have you all here. Thank you so much. So we're going to really dive in today. And yeah, gratitude for the huckleberries there, as Robin's saying, and Iran, and where else? Western Canada, California. Wow, just so awesome. So I know we're going to have some more folks tuning in and also checking out the recording of this later. So gratitude to all of you for joining us here today. I'm Josh Lane, and I'm going to jump into our slideshow here. So just bear with me for a moment here as I get this set up. Decoding the Secret Language of Nature. And we're going to be talking about bird language, especially today, because there is a pattern language in the world of nature. And we call it a secret language because it's going on constantly around us. But for many of us, especially those who've grown up in a more urban or suburban environment, we don't necessarily tune in as much to this language. And yet it's something that all the animals in the forest, almost kind of like the Jungle Book in a real life sense, tune in to that language of nature that's happening. And so hopefully this slideshow here is going to show up for you here in a second. And I'm just working with Matt here. Matt, can you see that now at all? Hopefully we get this.
No, it doesn't look like the screen share is started yet.
Okay, so I'll try that one more time. Getting used to our new webinar system here. Technical
Yeah,
things to
it's showing
deal
up
with.
as a screen share now.
Okay, Here we go. How's that looking there?
Yep, it's looking good.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt. And also thanks to Matt Goff behind the scenes with Eight Shields, helping to facilitate this for us on the technical side of things. And, going back to the topic here, basically there's a communication system that happens in nature. And this is something that helps animals have early warning of predators, of danger moving across the landscape. And if you think of a pebble thrown into a pond, and this is how Tom Brown describes this, the famous naturalist and author, and he talks about when you throw a pebble into a pond, that those ripples, those concentric rings, emanate out in all directions. And if you think about an animal moving on the landscape, or a person moving on the landscape, that is like a pebble being thrown into that water. And across the still surface of that water, the tapestry of nature, these concentric rings or these movements emanate out. So every time an animal moves, there's intent behind that behavior, and there are things being broadcast out through that animal moving. And that is actually being picked up on by different birds and different animals too, and being broadcast across the landscape. And so animals tune into this hidden language, and we can tune into this as well. And that's what we're going to be getting into here today. So I'm going to have several parts to the slideshow and the webinar here, and I'm going to give you as much tools as I can in this time period we're here together to help you get out there and bird language. I'll also have some things towards the end about how you can go further We are relaunching our Backyard Birds course for the 5th year this year. We also have some mentoring around bird language happening this spring. So even if you're not going to join us for that stuff, I recommend staying tuned in, because throughout the hour here, even in that part, I'll be sharing some different tips and techniques to highlight how you can get into this right in your own backyard. So just starting with some gratitude again, this is John Young here, and you can see his book, What the Robin Knows, How Birds Reveal the Secrets of the Natural World. So a lot of gratitude to John for bringing a lot of what we'll be sharing here today forward in the world. And John's been spending his whole life studying birds, and a lot of this is really thanks to him. And we've had the chance to work together for a long time, going way back. I started learning this stuff about 20 years ago, thanks to John and others that he trained at the time. And we've since had a chance to share these teachings all around the world, and even at places like the National Audubon Conference back in 2013, and really trying to get bird language out there in a bigger way. So check out his book, What the Robin Knows. And I actually had a chance to work with him on that and write the appendix section on how to learn bird language, where we condense a lot of the things we'll be sharing here today as well and go a bit deeper. So thanks to John. And as we'll be seeing in this next section, thanks to all those peoples who've kept these ancient traditions of understanding bird language alive throughout thousands of years. Because even though this skill isn't necessarily known so well today in the modern culture, it's actually something that has been carried by traditional peoples as a matter of survival and passed from generation to generation for thousands of years. And we'll talk about that now. If you look at this little timeline that I've put up here of human history, right? This is just a little thing that I put together to show this big line on the left of potentially hundreds of thousands of years. I've seen estimates of up to 400,000 years, looking at the history of humanity. And that hunter-gatherer period of living close to the earth represents that huge span of time that we've existed as a species. And then on the right, you see the dawn of agriculture, and there's different estimates on that, but about 10,000 years ago. And there's always new findings, but just think of that huge blue line of hunter-gatherer life that's really shaped our senses, our perceptions, our relationship with nature. And then agriculture shows up, and now the patterns of life start to shift. We become more sedentary, rooted in one spot, less nomadic, and our whole pattern of culture starts to shift there. And then at the very far side of this chart, you see that little red blip of the Industrial Revolution in the last couple hundred years, and all the changes that have gone with that. And then at the very end, on the far right, that little blue blip at the end is the digital age that we're in now. And so you think about in our life, how much has changed in the last, even 100 years, and now it's exponentially changing even every day, every hour, as tech era, and which still continues around the world for many cultures too. And that's our legacy of nature connection that's informing our sensory potential today. So when we tune into that and realize that our senses, we have the senses that help us survive as hunter-gatherers on the landscape. And Richard Louv, a great quote from his book, The Nature Principle, he says, the more high-tech we become, the more nature we need. Because of course we're seeing all kinds of stresses in the modern life and challenges that come up with this information age. And also at the same time, lots of studies that show that the more we connect with nature, the more health benefits, the more well-being we receive because of that ancient legacy. And bird language is intimately tuned into that. And every year, Eight Shields visits with a community in the Kalahari Desert in Botswana and visits with a community of Bushmen there. And these people are still living that ancient pattern of our human legacy and bringing these awareness tools, including bird language, into their daily lives. And here you see
Hey,
a
Josh.
family. Yes, Matt.
Sorry to interrupt. We lost you there for a couple of seconds and the screen share stopped, so you'll need to reshare your screen again.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And thanks for bearing with us here, folks. Where did you lose me there, Matt? Okay, so hopefully we're back up and running again there. Are we looking good, Matt?
Yep, looks good.
Great, thank you. So here we are. This is from a trip a few years ago, visiting with a Naro community in the Kalahari. And here is a family group. They're out gathering food and gathering roots to eat. And you can see that they bring the children with them when they're doing this. And just imagine, this is a scene that has gone on since the dawn of time, that all of our ancestors as well have lived this life path. And this is what has shaped our senses. And this is what our senses are adapted for. And imagine having the responsibility of being out on the land and you don't have any real big weapons with you or anything like that. You know, you might have a long stick with you to gather roots with, and you have your children with you. And you have to find these roots to feed your village. And you have a short period of time to do that, to find them, to keep your children safe, and to accomplish this. And meanwhile, you know, here's a photo of some lion tracks of an adolescent male lion that we tracked out there. So imagine that on this landscape, as you're gathering those roots, you know that there's lions right there. You know there's leopards. You know there's snakes. You know there's all kinds of potentially hazardous things. So while you're gathering this food, you have to have a part of your awareness that's spread out beyond what you're doing and tracking what's going on around you. And the more warning about potential danger, the better off you're going to be, because these large predators are out there. And when we spent time there, we really got to see how tuned in the people were to these patterns that the birds are broadcasting, and having that early warning to know exactly where the lions were, exactly where the leopard is, exactly where the snakes are. And that's what we're going to be getting into here. But you can see that this is really an ancient understanding. It's been passed down in many places. And really, our brains are wired for connecting into bird language because of these very reasons. So it's a very natural skill to learn. I know it sounds very esoteric at first, and we're going to demystify that here as we go further, but we're literally wired for connecting to this bird language. And when we had a chance to give society, we got some feedback at the end. And basically, somebody came up and said, you know, if I understand what you're saying, there's kind of three things I got out of this. One of them is birds talk to each other. The second thing is you can learn to understand what they're saying. And the third thing is it's really fun. And this was said to John Young, and John replied back, you know, that's exactly it. That's the 1, 2, 3 of bird language. So just know it's really natural. We're already hardwired to learn these skills when we get the basic understanding of what to sense and watch for. And it's a lot of fun once you start to learn these patterns, because it's kind of like once you learn to read, you just pick up a book. You don't have to think about it after you've put in the time to learn to read it. You just know what's on the page right away. And the same thing starts to happen with bird language, with these patterns that are moving in nature. When we tune in, we learn these patterns. It's exactly like that experience of reading a book. We just get the images in our mind. We know these scenarios that are happening around us where the animals are moving. So it's a lot of fun to tune in this way. And just another thought on the ancient legacy of bird language. Here's George Hempton, who's an audio ecologist. And this is from a blog article. You can see the link on the bottom from onbeing.org, an interview with him about what he's found in his investigations of the human ear and related to birds. And he says, quoting George here, he says, we have a very discrete bandwidth of super sensitive hearing between 2.5 and 5 kilohertz in the resonant frequencies of the auditory canal. So this is about our hearing, the frequencies that we hear right there. And he says, is there something in our ancestors' environment that matches our peak hearing human sensitivity? So he's asking, you know, why do we hear in this range of frequency? Is there anything in nature that's similar to that? And he says, indeed, there's a perfect match, bird song. and all
Hey,
these
Josh.
senses. Hey there, Matt.
Sorry, we lost you again there. You finished with bird song, and then you dropped, and we lost your screen share again.
Let's see here. I'll see if I can get that set back up. So bird song, was I going into the quote from George there?
You just literally just finished it.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Matt, and thanks everybody for bearing with us here. We'll get back in. How's that looking there? All right. So our brains expect really rich input from nature. So think about being out on a...
Sorry, Josh. Still not seeing the screen share.
Oh, interesting. Okay. It should be showing up now. Try that one more time. Let's see if I can get that going. Hopefully this will work a little better this time.
Yeah, it looks good now.
Great. Thank you, Matt. So imagine that you're out there in the Kalahari or some other place, and every day, wherever you are, if you're living as a hunter-gatherer, you have to go and get food. And while you're out there, you're bumping into things. You're bumping into tracks on the ground. You're watching the phases of the moon. You're seeing birds moving, and they're telling you things about distant predators. And, you're exercising your sense of balance outdoors. You're recognizing patterns of plants and tracks. So this is the input that our brain expects, this rich, textured, multidimensional input of things constantly changing, and then these fractal patterns of nature. And that's one thing our brain expects, but it also expects support from our culture to integrate all that information that we pick up every day and make meaning out of it. And this is a really ancient cycle that's really key to learning bird language. Is you go out and sense, like on the bottom of the wheel here, and then you come back and you integrate what you learned. You might share your story around the fire, or maybe your elders will ask you something that'll help you deepen what you just learned. So the first part, again, is experience. You want to get outside as much as you can. Watch the birds that are in your yard. Watch what's going on around you. And then you come back and you sit with some questions. Now you could do that with a journal and ask yourself, what did I experience with all my senses today with the birds? And really write down those stories. Use sensory detail when you do that. And of course, the other way to do that is to find mentors, who have the experience to know those specific questions that will help you grow past your edge. And in the village, we saw this happening every day. In the bottom right here, you can see the kids mimicking the adults. They just naturally, of course, kids copy everything adults do. And, that's one of those mechanisms for transmitting that knowledge. And then the elders, they're watching them and they're asking them questions. They're having conversations and seeing what the kids are picking up and helping them to grow that by asking them some questions and sharing some stories every day. So that's the role of the village in learning bird language when we look at the roots of this and start to think, how can we bring this into our daily lives now?
Josh, we lost you again right when you said start thinking about how we can bring this back into our daily lives. So lost the screen share.
Okay, I'll go back in here. Okay, here we go. So going into how we can activate some bird language skills for ourselves in our daily life here in part one. And there's 4 key principles I really want to share with you today. And we'll go through these one at a time. These are things to watch for when you're watching the birds in your yard or in your favorite birding spots. What we call baseline versus events. This is the first principle. And baseline is, business as usual. And you see birds hanging out, they're doing their thing. You probably hear some song happening. You might see birds preening their feathers, other maintenance behaviors. They're feeding. So they're basically doing the things they want to be doing. So that's what we call baseline. And it's got a feeling to it. It's got quality to it. And you have to get to know baseline and how that feels at different times of day and really building that connection. So that's the first one there, is getting to the baseline.
We just lost you for a moment, but it killed the screen share again.
Okay, going back in. Okay, how's that looking, Matt? Is that working? Okay, so this is baseline here. So we want to watch for when birds are in their baseline, when it feels like they're just doing their usual thing. And baseline has a relaxed feeling to it. It's kind of like, okay, everything's right, everything's normal, things are flowing.
Looks good.
Great, thanks, Matt. A little bit of a delay between our communication here. So baseline is when everything's...
Now your voice is breaking up.
Okay. Voices sounding here. If that's working any better now. So hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully the slide is on there. But basically baseline is something we want to learn. And so if you have a sit spot, a place where you go and you watch the birds, you want to start to get a sense at different times of day what's happening with the baseline. Because early in the morning when it's the dawn chorus, which is an amazing thing to tune into, when the birds first wake up and they start their burst of song in the spring, this is an amazing sense of baseline.
I'm not hearing you right now. Oops, we just lost you. Sorry about the technical difficulties, folks. Yeah. Switched over recently. Hey, Josh, we lost you again. Now your voice is not coming through clearly.
Okay, we'll try to see if we can get this going here again. How are we doing there, Matt? Anything now? Is the sound working a little better here, folks, or are we still having trouble with the sound coming through? Okay, so folks are hearing my voice okay. So, okay, fine in Paris. Let me see, Matt, maybe you can keep posted on this. My voice is okay all the time, just video gives trouble. My voice is sounding good, but folks were having trouble seeing the pictures. Yeah, I was hearing Matt break up too when he was speaking. Okay. I'm going to try to get the slides going again here, folks, and hopefully this will do the trick. So thanks for bearing with. All right, so hopefully you're seeing slides or at least can hear my voice. We'll keep going with baseline here. And, at some point we may have to redo this webinar, but hopefully we'll try to keep things rolling here. So, beyond baseline, the opposite of baseline is an event, kind of like what we have going with this webinar here. It's when something's up and things, seem to not be in harmony. In this case, we have a technical challenge, but in the bird language world, this would be if you're out at your sit spot, you're watching the birds, everything seems like it's in baseline, you're hearing songs, and then all of a sudden everything stops. Singing stops, preening stops, feeding stops, and all the regular maintenance behaviors that birds do just suddenly stop. And when that happens, like something's up, something just happened, and we call that an event when that happens. So you want to watch for that. It's a definite shift in behavior and a shift in the feeling, and some clues as well for when baseline is happening or when it's being broken. We call this posture and positioning. And if you put those together, you get body language. So you want to watch for a bird's body language, where it is, if it's down low, up high, and what its posture is. Is it looking down at something? Is it craning its neck? And if the slides are showing up here, I've got some photos of a flicker and a robin, and just, kind of look and see what these birds are doing. And they're craning their neck and looking around for danger. So if you see that, that's telling you something. It's not just a bird up on a branch looking around, but it's what we call a sentinel. And the sentinel's been pulled up there to get a better view of something. So there's a reason that bird is up there looking around and being really still and quiet. So we call that the sentinel. And it's one of the most common things to watch for with bird language. When you see that, a bird sitting really still up on a wire, you want to start to look around and ask, why is it doing that? In this case, we've got a little dog in the graphic here, that bird has flown up to get a view of, but often it'll be a hawk. So, you start to look and listen further out onto the landscape, and that's something to watch for. Another thing to check out, principle number 3, is what we call watching for sound intention. And of course, the baseline, that's the business as usual. It's got the song, and not just one of the birds you're watching, but usually a bunch of different kinds of species of birds will be singing. So you want to listen close around you, but also listen far into the distance, and get a sense of where that baseline extends to when you're listening for sound intention. And songs tend to be very melodious and fluid. They have a really relaxed sound to them, often a lot of sense of harmony. And think of the whistled sound of a robin. And of course, not all birds have quite that melodious song. Some of them are a lot simpler and even harsher sounding. But in general, when you're tuning in the baseline, there will be a sort of relaxed feeling to the sounds. They won't cause you a sense of tension, but you'll feel like everything's right. And we'll see if this sound comes through here. I've got a photo of a song sparrow up, and some other birds. You'll hear mourning doves in the background cooing, and there's the trill of the sparrow singing there, and the other birds in the background singing. So it's a very relaxed kind of feeling, even though it's a bit of a sharp song as songs go. But there's a feeling of baseline there, and that's important to tune into. And we'll compare that in a bit with the feeling of an event. But when we were in the Kalahari, we had a chance to interview some of the elders in this community about bird language. And we were sitting there with this elder Dew, who you see on the right here. And if you're seeing the pictures, and we knew that in the area there were lions, and we were out gathering some food together. And John Young was there too. And he started to hear, I think it was a pied babbler, and I don't think I have a picture of a babbler, but he heard one singing, or not singing. He heard several of them making calls that sounded, fairly agitated. And the Bushman had told him that that was one of the birds they really listen for to know where the lions are, because the babblers really react strongly to the movement of lions. So, John heard the babblers going. They were making a racket, and he was getting concerned, wondering if, is this the lion alarm, And the Bushmen were very relaxed, so they noticed he was getting agitated, and they said, "What are you worrying about?" And he said, "Well, I hear the pied babbler right now. Is that the bird you told me about that signals about the lions?" And, then they understood why he was feeling tense, and they were all kind of cracking up, and they said, no. And they all these 3 elders that were there together, they all tapped their solar plexus at the same time. And the translator told us they were saying, no, that's just the babblers talking to each other and fighting over something. They're not talking about the lions right now. But it was interesting because they all pointed to their solar plexus, and they said it does not feel tense right now. It feels like baseline. Basically, was what they were saying. So when you hear sounds, tune into the feeling that you get as well. And that feeling often broadcasts through the solar plexus is kind of that gut sense. that you hear talked about when know something's up, something, you get a subtle feeling or maybe not so subtle. And the birds in their song, that has one feeling, and then an alarm has a totally different feeling. So don't just tune in with your ears, but tune in with your feeling sense as well when you're listening to sounds, and listen and feel for that tension to know if there's an alarm that's happening. And that's a real key principle to learning and decoding this language that the birds use. So principle number 4, the last one I wanted to share, was that idea of conservation of energy. Because a bird, they're on a lean energy budget a lot of the time. And that's especially true in the winter and in harsh climates. But, oftentimes it's like, think about having to gather food every day, right? And then it's cold at night or whatever, or if you get chased by a predator, you have to expend a lot of energy. So, and singing just in itself is a huge energy drain. There's so much energy required for a bird to sing around its territory and attract a mate. So birds have to conserve their energy. And this principle helps us actually start to understand why bird language works the way it does, because they go only far enough away to get away from danger and stay safe, because their energy budget doesn't allow otherwise most of the time. So here we see a cat, or just imagine a cat coming, if you can't see the image here, but a cat's coming through the yard and a bird's on the ground. And what does it do? Well, it hooks up to the top of the bush just out of reach of the cat, because it probably sees that cat every day, especially if it's a bird that lives there year round and the cat's there all the time. They know each other and they have assessed each other's strengths and weaknesses on some level as a matter of survival. The cat wants to get the bird and the bird, of course, wants to avoid the cat. So the bird is going to go, usually, and I say this is a tendency because I've seen all kinds of things happen, but as a tendency, a bird will go just far enough to get away from the cat. So, it knows that cat can only jump so high, and it will go just high enough to stay out of reach. And maybe if there's no landing place nearby, it'll fly even higher, or if it gets surprised, then it might fly even higher. But we're talking about when it knows that cat's coming, it'll get just out of reach. So that is something to watch for. And this is a real clue into decoding what the birds are saying, because you have to get to know the different animals that live in your area. And I'm going to talk more about this in part 2 here coming up. But you got to get to know, who lives in your neighborhood. The foxes, the weasels, the owls. Think about all the things that could eat a bird, and then what is their capability as a predator? How fast do they fly? What's their striking distance? How high can they jump? How fast do they move across the ground? So when you understand that, and then you understand this law of conservation of energy, you have a key into figuring out through some logical deduction, what animal is causing that alarm, because a bird's going to go just far enough to get out of the way. So again, the cold and the rain and harsh conditions make it so birds want to move as little as possible. Like, you don't want to scare a bird off its roost at night in the winter when it's freezing cold, because they'll have just enough warmth trapped between their feathers to keep them warm for the night. So they really do have to conserve their energy, and it really does drive their behavior in a powerful way. So another cool thing that helps them conserve energy and stay safe is what we call ventriloquial calls. So, this is, if you think of the ventriloquist and the dummy, he's kind of casting his voice, so it looks like it's coming out of where the dummy is. And it's basically certain frequencies of sound can appear to come from other places, or they're hard to locate because they echo around, or they're just hard to tell exactly where they are. So robins, and a number of other birds will use a really high-pitched call, like a seat call. And I'll try to mimic it. It's like a very high-pitched, sharper and louder than what I just did, but it's high-pitched. And when an accipiter, like a bird-eating hawk, like a Cooper's hawk or a sharp-shinned hawk, is around, if they're really close to that robin, the robin's going to stay still because it doesn't want the hawk to see it. And it'll make these high-pitched seat calls and alarm, the other birds nearby that this hawk is there. But the hawk will have trouble actually locating that sound because it's so high-pitched the way it moves through space, it's hard to see where it is. So ventriloquial calls are another way, and they also, of course, they just confuse the predator, but that bird doesn't even have to move, but it can still alarm and warn others that there's danger nearby. So listen for seat calls, and if it gets real quiet as well in the area and singing stops, you've got a good chance that there's an accipiter in the area. So let's put all that together, those different pieces we just gave you, and do a little scenario. So in this scenario I'm going to give you, I want you to pay attention for those 4 things. Is it a baseline or is it an event? That's number 1. And then the posture and position. So watch the body language. That's number 2. Sound and tension. Listen for the sounds. Feel for any tension. That's number 3. And then watch for how conservation of energy might come into play. So those are 4 things I really want to train you on, to start watching when you're observing birds. And we've got this little scenario here. So there's whether you're seeing this or not, I'll try to describe it. But imagine you've got a thicket that's maybe 6 or 7 feet tall, really dense thicket. And there's some birds that have collected in that thicket. And maybe you've got a junco, and I've got in the picture here a quail and a robin, just some different birds I put in a graphic. And I'm going to play a sound, and hopefully that'll come through. But these birds are on top of the thicket in kind of an umbrella shape, kind of like a upside down dish shape. They're spread out over the top of the bush, and they are looking downwards. So their body posture is looking down. And listen to these calls. And so those calls are a bit harsh, multiple species all making kind of sharp, short calls, and they're looking down into the bushes. So, think about who might have caused an alarm like that. And in this case, it was a bobcat. And that's a very typical thing for any kind of cat to cause a shape like that, where the birds are just out of reach, up high, they're in a thicket, so it's hard for the cat to get through the branches. It sounds like the calls maybe didn't come through, Matt's saying, but think of calls that are kind of like, or harsh calls like a jay might do, like a psh, 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 psh. So if you hear really staccato, harsh calls, and there's multiple species doing them, and they're looking down in the bushes, and they're moving slowly over the top of the bushes, just out of reach of something, it's probably a cat, because they move real slow and quietly. And birds are definitely on their menu, and they have a reputation. So those are some things. We put all those together, those 4 pieces. It was definitely an event, wasn't baseline. The birds were on top of the bushes looking down. They're using really sharp, short, fast calls. No songs going on. These were kind of that fast, sharp sound. And the birds were conserving their energy just by flying up to the top of the dense bushes, just out of reach. So those are the kind of clues, and the way you want to think about it. When you hear birds alarming, you start to ask these questions. It's an event. So how high up are they? Are they low to the ground for like a ground predator, or are they way up high for an aerial predator? Does it seem tense when you listen? And how are they responding? Are they getting close to something? Are they flying away at full speed? And think about what would cause them to do that, because they have to conserve their energy as much as possible. So those are some principles I wanted to share with you to put into action in your yard or wherever you're watching birds. And you'll start to figure out some mysteries through that, because they're kind of the real core building blocks I've seen in the last 20 years. Those are things that really help you start to piece it together. And I'm only scratching on the surface here because there's so much to it, but I wanted to just share a bit about this special opportunity we have coming back for folks who want to go deeper. We've actually, myself and John Young, this will be our 5th year of launching our Backyard Bird Language online course. And every spring we like to do this. And basically it's a chance to go further. So I'm going to, share a bit about that now. And even if you're not looking to do a course like that right now, I recommend sticking on here, because I'm going to be sharing some more tips as I go through, what we'll be actually training folks in each of the modules, and that'll actually give you some more ideas you can put into practice as well. And we also have a mentoring program we'll be launching soon that'll really dive into this. So I encourage you to stick around. And this is really going to go deep into how you read this language and this alarm system of the birds. And it's really hard to condense it any more than I've done here today, because we've kind of built a whole 6 weeks worth of curriculum around this. But I think just with the principles I just gave you, you'll be able to start looking at, hopefully in a little bit of a different way, at the bird behavior that you see, and start to ask some different questions around it. But really, the course is designed to help you get out every day and just engage your senses with some simple exercises that'll help you tune into birds. We've created guided field practices to help you do that, as well as video and audio. So, why did we create it? And one reason is because this language and this knowledge is, in a sense, at risk in terms of remaining, like all these different teachings that have come through the generations. When these things aren't being used, when culture shifts and, modern lifestyles prevail, so to speak, these skills kind of fall to the back burner because people don't need to rely on them as much to stay surviving. So I really wanted to create something that would help put all these skills into one place and make this knowledge more accessible again, as well as speed up the journey, because I spent a long time over the last 20 years, putting these things together from things I was learning from John and from other places. And I really wanted to work with him to create something that we could put out there that would help people pick this up as quickly as possible. And I know that not everybody has the ability to go and travel, to come actually live with us in a place to learn this for a week. So we looked at how could we do this in a way that people could do it at their own pace at home and really still get this. So we put together a 6-week, 6-module online course with video, audio, and PDFs and daily practices, as well as a responder, so you could send in your observations with each module and get personal feedback, and not just know these skills intellectually, but get out into the field and put them into practice so that you can embody them, and get that knowledge on the body level, where it's like you just know what's happening because you've put in the time and you've been guided in the core practices to help you do that. So the first module is an introduction, and basically the first week, we're just helping you get your core routines in place that'll really set you up to learn this, and just guiding you one piece at a time and getting those things going, and priming your senses for some patterns to watch for. And we really use that pattern of sensing and then integrating what you've learned. So we send you out every day with different field observation practice and a little audio to get you out there, as well as like a video for each week that kind of gives you a whole bunch of techniques and principles, and then just a little daily exercise that'll inspire you to get you out there to activate your senses. And at the end of the day, to come back and journal a bit with some very specific questions, because we've modeled this after that village mentoring approach, and after helping hundreds and even thousands of people now learning bird language around the world, the types of questions that just one step at a time help you tune in day by day to these patterns, and just deepen your experience a little bit every day and help your senses expand to take in these patterns. So that's really what the course is built on, is field practices and then reflection, and having your stories caught by our personal responder who will get back to you through email after each module, give you some feedback. And that's really where it's at when you want to grow these skills. You want that guidance and you want that feedback to help you do this. And just to know that somebody's catching your story, and then to know that there's questions waiting for you every day when you come back too. And it's not something that takes a ton of time. You can just be out there for 10 or 15 minutes. And with the right guidance, you can tune into a lot and come back and process that really quickly. We're also going to get you mapping a little bit with each module and show you how to use a bird's eye view map to just kind of in shorthand really quickly get down your observations, and you'll start to see patterns. So even if you don't do the course, this is something you should start to do. Make a base map of your sit spot, put your road on there, your house, any trails and trees and fence lines, and once you have that base map, you can start to put, patterns that you see, like where birds are moving, where they're roosting. These kinds of things will help you start to learn bit by bit what the birds are doing right in your yard. When we get into module 1, we're getting into what we call shapes of alarm, like that sentinel shape we talked about earlier. There's a whole vocabulary of these different shapes built on the things I shared with you earlier, that when you hear and see how the birds are positioned and how they're calling and moving, you can actually start to figure out who's causing that alarm. Not just that there's an alarm happening, but who's likely to be causing that. Is that a snake? Is it a leopard? Is it a Cooper's hawk or is it a red-tailed hawk? You can get that specific with these kinds of alarms. So we spend a lot of time on that, because that's really where you get these sort of Jedi skills, where you just hear something and right away, like, oh, that's the red tail being mobbed by the crows, or, oh, there goes a weasel. So this is possible, and it's something you can learn. It's so much fun once you start to get into that level, and you can get there pretty quick, which is really cool. So, to put this into practice on your own, think about, again, the predators in your area. Make a list of the ones that live nearby, like the mammals, the avian predators, and start to get to know the behavior and baseline of the birds in your yard. And when that's broken, start to think about those different predators and who might be causing that. And think about the sound, the position, the feeling, and the speed of those alarms and how they move. And in module 2, we're going to go further into the building blocks that build those alarms with the 5 voices of bird language. And this is cool, because with the shapes and the 5 voices, you can apply this knowledge around the world, wherever you are. So, like when I visited that Bushman community in Africa, I didn't know a single bird there, literally. And I was a photographer on the trip too, and I didn't have a lot of time to be looking things up in field guides, because I was getting pictures for the trip. But one thing that was really cool was I had put in my time with learning these patterns in North America. And when I got to Africa, right away, I started to be able to actually listen to the birds. And I didn't know them by species, but I could listen, and by the patterns, by the shapes, and by the 5 voices, I could tell, down to a very close level, what type of predator was causing an alarm. Like, okay, that's a cat causing that one, or that's a mongoose, or that's a snake, or, that's an accipiter. So once you start to know this stuff, it's really cool, because you can take it with you wherever you go and get a sense of baseline and alarms and how to interpret those alarms. So that's really what we want to train you in this course and in this information we're giving you here. And something that'll help you is what we call the rule of 3. So if you hear several species alarming in one spot, like it's not just robins, but it's robins and flickers and juncos or whatever combination. If you hear more than one species, and especially if you hear 3 or more, you're probably looking at an alarm, because otherwise it might just be territorial behavior between 2 robins or whatever species. But if you hear other species getting in the mix and baseline's broken, that's that event happening. So there's a mystery there waiting for you to solve it. So watch for the rule of 3 when you're listening to song and alarms. And if you hear more than 3 species alarming, or at least 3, you're very likely to have an alarm happening. And in module 3, we actually do get into specifically common causes of alarm. So this is learning about those predators that live in your area. And we go through some really common ones that are in North America, but also you'll find variants of them around the world, and look at some strategies for how to get to know them, understand their behavior, and then through that, have a better sense when you hear alarms to assess who's probably causing them and why that might be. So that's a really fun module. And again, just make that list of who are the ground predators in your area. So who are the mammals, who are the snakes, those 2 especially. And then who are the aerial predators, the raptors that hunt and live in your area. And that'll get you a long way towards at least having a suspect list when you hear an alarm, to start to be informed about how to deduce who might be causing it. And in module 4, we get into bird language allies. So these are your real teachers. These are the birds that live right around your sit spot and in your yard that you see every day. And you want to get to know them really well. And especially a few species, get to know everything about those species. Watch them directly in your yard and keep notes on them. And we go over what really makes a great bird language bird to start learning with, because there are so many birds out there that you could learn. How do you even get started? So we create a top 5 species list and go over their characteristics so you can apply that idea wherever you are. And start with the ones that feed on the ground, because they're going to tell you about what's moving on the ground. And also start with the ones that are around your home year round. And just go in a field guide and use the range maps to try to figure out who lives around your home year round and which ones feed on the ground. And that is a place to at least start to hone that idea of your local bird language allies. And in module 5, we go into what we call a deeper awareness. And this is really fun because this is how you can blend and flow a baseline and cause less of a splash when you go out there. And we like the example of, the hiker who's walking from point A to point B and just looking down at the ground and maybe listening to headphones. And there's what we call the zone of awareness, what you're noticing. And that hiker's zone of awareness is probably right around their feet, and so their zone of disturbance is actually going out beyond that. And so, of course, if they see the deer, they're seeing the deer's rump as it, runs away, because they've disturbed more than they've been aware. But if we can slow down and we can bring that zone of disturbance in close around us and then expand our awareness, then we have a better chance to keep everything in baseline and flow with that and actually see animals in their natural behaviors. So that's a really fun effect of learning bird language. You'll actually have a better chance to see animals do what they're naturally doing. So if you're a photographer, this is a great thing that can help you in that. Or if you just like to observe, wildlife behavior, this will be an interesting inroads for you, because mammals are paying attention to bird language too, and they use it quite often to know where people are. So just keep that in mind. As well, it's a great way to just relax and sink into your sit spot every day, sink into your senses. And when you do this, you start to build up this resource of relaxation that you can carry with you. So we can call that mindful birding. It's a great way to tune into the moment, because you'll always be tuning into the sounds and calls of the birds around you, and it becomes a natural meditation. So just a couple ideas, to do that. Basically move slowly when you go out to your sit spot, and stop and pause frequently and listen and sense around you. And that'll help start to diminish that zone of disturbance and expand your zone of awareness. And we go into a lot of techniques around this, and actually how to read the language of the birds and to know exactly where that fine line is, where we avoid disturbing them and can move through their zones without creating as much of a ripple. And that stuff gets really fun when you put it into practice. So we'll give you some very cool things you can do around that. And we also try to reach, not only to visual learners, but to audio learners too, because we have daily MP3 tracks in the course every day. You get to listen to one in the morning and get a little exercise to try outside that day. And lots of inspiring stories and other facts and practices that'll help you pick up bird language as fast as possible, as well as transcripts of the videos and training videos with John Young with each module, where he really goes deep into the principles of each of those topics, as well as daily reflection guides. So at the end of the day, you've done your practice and you come back and there's some questions waiting for you, just like a mentor, to help you think back on what happened and to go a little deeper. So, when you do that, basically each module has these questions for you, and you fill those out. And once you finish them, you can email them into your course responder, who will give you feedback within just a few days. And it's great to know somebody's catching your stories and helping you grow that way. And you'll have access to, do this course at your own pace for up to 6 months if you want that responder's feedback, and then long-term access to the course just to keep viewing all the materials. So it's really easy. You just log in and, everything's there waiting for you, and you'll get an email each week to let you know there's a new module available. And, this is why we put it together, was also because if you actually had to fly somewhere to go and learn this, you might spend $900 or so to go to an intensive for a week where we, have the luxury of training you in person on this. And then you might be spending, $800 or more, depending on where you're coming from, for airfare and car rental, plus taking time off to do it. So, that could be 1,700 or 2,000 bucks just to get somewhere and learn this in person. So we know that that's just really challenging today. So, we put together this whole course with all these modules and feedback and training videos and audios so that you could do this more at your own pace at home, not have to take that time off from work to go do that. And, just for $350 rather than a couple thousand, to try to make this a bit, more within reach for folks. And as well, for the next 48 hours, just to celebrate this relaunch and the spring here, we're going to make this available for $297. Plus, we've got a couple of special bonuses. I put together a quick guide of essential birding resources, a PDF that at a glance can show you, comparison of some of the top birding apps out there, as well as some essential field guides and resources to know about, as well as some other events and things. So that'll help you dive right in and know what resources would really help you in terms of, actually connecting with the identification level of birds and stuff like that. And also for the next 48 hours, for folks who jump into the course, we're going to offer a new video I just put together. It's called Birding 101. And it's about using field marks, because I know that not everybody who gets into bird language has experienced birding. And they might have never really spent any time, connecting with the birds. They don't even know where to begin. So, to help with that, I put together this video. It's basically, I guide you through the top 10 things you need to know when you start to identify birds in the field visually. So what are you looking for when you do that? And that'll really help you just get a jump start if you're new to this, what kind of field marks to look for that help you start to tune into not just what a species, how to identify a species, but even to read a little bit into their behavior and their natural history just from what you're visually seeing, their body shape and things like that. So that's a really fun half-hour training I put together. We're going to give that as a bonus for folks who join the course in the next 48 hours. As well, we have a couple other bonuses built into the course. The 5 voices guessing game. So that'll test you once you learn those 5 voices to start to, test that and train that, as well as a video called Mystery Shapes of Alarm, where I put together an animation sequence that tests you, so you see how birds respond to different predators, and then you try to guess based on all those techniques we've been sharing. You guess and then try to deduce, what predator is causing that alarm. And we actually debrief each of those, go through step by step every single thing, all the clues that help you suss out what that mystery predator is. So those are some great trainings we've built in. And you can get started today if this is something you're excited about and you'd like to join us for this experience. We're going to be emailing out the link. I know that there's some technical challenges with the webinar today, so I'll also read it off now. But we'll be emailing that out too, so you can get in there even today. We'll have that email go out. But if you want to go there right now and you can't see the screen, that's HTTPS, and I think that's a : tinyurl.com, tinyurl.com/learnbirdlanguage. And we'll see if we can get that into the link in just a moment here too, into the chat. That's tinyurl.com/learnbirdlanguage. And, we stand behind our courses with a money back guarantee, 30 days, get to check it out. And for some reason, it just doesn't meet your needs, and you really didn't get what you hoped out of it. We stand solid behind the course. So, money back guarantee, no questions asked for 30 days. And again, this is a 48-hour special, so you'll save $50 off and get those extra bonuses at $297 for the next 48 hours. And I know that common questions that we've had about this, what if I've never birded before? And that's actually okay, because even if you can't identify a single species, like I was mentioning earlier, once you start to get a sense of these patterns and how the birds position themselves and how they are vocalizing and the feeling, you put these pieces together the way we'll show you, even if you don't know the species involved, you'll have a sense of who's causing that alarm. And of course, if you know, and you're already an expert birder, a lot of people are like, well, do I need to do a course like this if I've been birding for 40 years even, And it's been amazing to actually get to share this with folks from Audubon and from different, birding groups that are out there. Folks who've been lifetime birders have, learned these skills, and just it's so cool to hear their reports. Like one woman said who'd been birding for 50 years. She said, this reminded me of why I started birding in the first place. And she said she felt like a little girl, just filled with joy and mystery, tuning into the birds and wondering, who's causing these alarms, and then being able to figure that out. So even if you've been birding a long time and you know a lot about bird behavior, you might be surprised, because we're often getting folks in that situation who say to us later, wow, I can't believe I didn't know this stuff already after being in the field so long. But it's because it's something that really the scientific community now, with all the ornithology research, is just starting to catch up with this ancient knowledge of these patterns right now. We're seeing a lot of research right now getting into this. It's really cool. But this is stuff that has been known in hunter-gatherer cultures. So even if you're an expert birder, there's a good chance that you'll get quite a boost to your toolkit that you can put into use right away in the field. And if you already know your birds and you know their calls and songs, that'll give you a leg up too, and you'll be able to put this into practice even quicker. But you might be surprised what you can add to your toolkit. So even if you're an expert birder, I would recommend this course as well, because I think it will add a lot to your experience. And this is something we consistently hear from folks, even who've been birding for years and years. And another question folks ask is, can I really learn this from home? And certainly you can. And we really try to structure this piece by piece so that you have a little something to do every day. And you can also go at your own pace with it. You have long-term access to the course. And as well, if you want the responder feedback, you have up to 6 months to make use of that. And if you really were jamming on this course and you did it every day, you could go through this in 6 weeks, doing a little something every day. And I know a lot of folks, take more time than that, but I know there's some of you who are just chomping at the bit, ready to jump in there. And if you have, just even 20 minutes a day, maybe 10 minutes to get outside and tune in, and then another 10 at the end of the day to answer a few questions and think back on it, you'll really make some progress quick. So you definitely can learn this from home. We've had people do this in their backyard and their local park. So these are great places to do this. You could even get out and find a second spot on the weekends you go to that's a little bit more in the wilderness. But try to put this into practice right in your backyard. Do I need good internet for this course? That's another common question. That I would say yes. Definitely want to have some good internet, because we've got video and audio and things like that. So that would be one requirement I would recommend. Good internet and a modern, fairly updated computer to be able to run everything. As well, for folks who want to jump in, we're going to be doing a distance mentoring series on bird language starting in May 17th through June 14th. And we're going to have 5 group calls. This is a add-on option. So you could either just do the course, or you could also add on this mentoring series. And this is something I've been dreaming up for a while, because I really want to find a focus group of dedicated people who have some time that want to jump in. And this will be a small group experience where we'll meet over the phone once a week and connect on some calls, and I'll offer some additional training, as well as you'll get to experience mentoring directly that way. And when you have a group of folks that are really wanting to learn it that way, it just boosts everything so fast and jumpstarts your learning, and will support your course journey in the online course well. We'll, add on to that experience and get into some other practices and topics too. And you'll have a very supportive group to share your learning and experiences with. So you'll find information on that at the bottom of the page I mentioned, tinyurl.com/learnbirdlanguage. And you'll see all the information I've gone through, but you can just scroll to the bottom and you'll see, the sign up both for the course and for the mentoring series. And we're going to get into, in the distance mentoring, we're going to get into some other stuff like behavior and physiology and other behaviors, and tracking and site analysis for bird language, and some other things I'll be sending you out to do. So we're going to have a lot of fun, and there'll be some mentoring hot seats where you get to experience that mentoring and experience others being mentored too, so you can really absorb that in that small group experience. So that's an additional add-on we have available. And it, again, through all this, the real key to learning bird language is get out there, have the experience, come back and journal and ask some questions or answer some questions about what you experienced. Try to stretch yourself a little bit and then repeat that. And that's the real key. So I just want to say thank you for everybody tuning in today, bearing with our little technical snafus as we proceeded forward. I hope that even if you couldn't see the slides for the whole thing, that you got something out of this, and learned a few principles and techniques. And really, I'm just grateful for everybody that tuned in here today. So stay posted. Again, we'll have an email going out with that link in it as well. And just, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you for, all the folks all around the world tuning in today. We'll have a replay of this out for folks too, if you want to listen in again, and for anybody who missed this live. So thank you again, everybody. And thanks, Matt, behind the scenes. And thanks, John Young, for passing all these teachings forward, and everybody, all the different people that have helped contribute to the body of knowledge of bird language. So I'll give it to Matt to wrap us up. And thanks everybody. Have a great day. And I see the link is up there in the chat too, if you want to check out that page. So thanks everybody.